Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group. And this is a podcast series aimed at STEM graduates, where I'm interviewing, speaking to CTOs, CPOs, just senior level people within our client base and future tech companies, asking them thoughts, a bit about their story, and advice for our listeners, really, who are looking at potentially entering the job market or in the middle of your studies thinking about the future. So it's great to have Charlotte Forsyth with me today. Charlotte is the Chief People Officer at WorldRemit. WorldRemit is a global payments platform. Anyone within FinTech would have probably heard about them and seen them in the paper, as they're doing some really impressive things right now. And great for Charlotte to join us. So hi, Charlotte.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you today?
Yeah, very good, thank you. It definitely feels like autumn has arrived, so
Yeah, heating's on for the first time.
It's going to be a long winter working from home.
Well, that's it. And we were just talking a second ago, weren't we, about thinking about the impacts of working from home and how it's going to be in the long term.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's jump straight in and find out a bit about your story. How did you get into being a Chief People Officer?
So I began my HR career after a bit of a detour via sort of retail. I'd always had a variety of retail and restaurant jobs growing up. So doing a retail management graduate program at Boots was kind of a bit of a natural sort of step. I've always been very sort of passionate about the customer, and I do think that's stood me in quite good stead from a HR perspective. And I would say I grew up in HR in financial services, so a number of recruitment and then generalist HR roles in financial services, which gave me really good grounding. And then lastly, found my way into media, live radio, and now sort of tech and fintech. And I've just always really enjoyed being a very sort of fast-moving, customer-focused sort of businesses. And the thing that I've always really enjoyed about tech and media, perhaps more so than traditional banking, it's just that opportunity to build something. And that's what I really enjoy doing. I enjoy building teams and enjoy building people functions that ultimately deliver for the business. So.
Fantastic. And so when you think about fintech and you're like comparing it to media and other industry sectors, is there anything that really separates them right now from a people perspective?
I think kind of the synergies with being able to come in and build and shape sort of something for the future kind of still really resonates. And I definitely found that in media, I found that in radio, and I sort of found that in tech as well. I think kind of with fintech, there's a pace thing which is just phenomenal, and which I really enjoy. Now, with that sometimes comes a little bit of complexity or ambiguity, and that's something that I think anyone coming into that market perhaps needs to be comfortable with, and I'm sure we'll come on to that sort of later. And I think with fintech as well, there's just so much opportunity, and I think the last 6 months have really shown that if you play in a digital space, actually kind of, it can really revolutionize your business. And again, that's what I've really enjoyed, just like constant pace and constant change. And I think our business is globally very diverse, and actually kind of how we provide solutions kind of really translates differently for different sort of parts of the world. And again, just on an intellectual basis, I really enjoy kind of finding out about sort of what different customers are doing in different parts of the world. So I think you've got to enjoy the pace, and I think you've got to have an element of intellectual curiosity as well, that you want to find out more.
Yeah, well, again, I couldn't agree more when I think about fintech, but all digital transformations and any business that's embracing tech. It's gone are the days that technology is the service to the business. It's now the profit center, isn't it? It's what really the cutting edge side of it. Again, I think that probably links quite nicely to a lot of our listeners who are STEM graduates, and I couldn't recommend more this as a field of study for people. And with you having people at the heart of what you do, I guess one of the key questions would be what do you look for? When you're thinking about graduates or people joining the business, what are the key triggers for you?
Yeah, and I think so. I actually began my sort of in-house recruitment career in graduate recruitment at sort of HSBC when I moved over from kind of the retail side. So kind of graduates have always held quite a place in my heart. Has more latterly apprenticeships as well, sort of with the sort of real focus on apprenticeships the last couple of years. So I guess that sort of junior talent cohort, whether it's graduate or not, so that's always been a real area of focus sort of for me. And I think working in HSBC graduate recruitment 13 years ago, I think, sort of some of those, it's frightening when I think about it, some of those same skills and properties still hold true. So whenever I've worked with graduates these days, I'm always blown away by academically kind of how brilliant some of them are, and in terms of the extracurricular stuff they might have done at uni, the number of languages they can speak, it's sort of super impressive. So kind of if graduates have got that, great. However, for me, there's still an element of that sort of commercial maturity sort of piece. I guess, and I'm sure again we'll come on to this, but in terms of thinking about applying for a job or going for an interview, whatever your work experience is, whether it's sort of academic, whether it's in the field of an internship or running the social society or whatever at the university, it's about thinking what's the impact. And I think for me that's always been a real differentiator of graduates at interview, when they can actually talk about the impact. They've got that focus on the customer, they understand kind of what the end result was. And I think that's always a bit of a differentiator. As I said, it's having that commercial maturity as well as perhaps whatever you've achieved academically as well.
And that's a really good point around other interests, because with graduates, understandably, they're not going to have a career history that they can leverage per se. So having those out of curricular, extracurricular activities, even if it is running a social club or things like this, stand out, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. I think I was the captain of the women's darts team, my whole residence at uni, and the women's pool team and stuff. But anything like that, again, because it's working with other people, it's sort of being focused on an outcome, it's being kind of performance driven, it's understanding what is your impact, whether that's on a social level or a commercial one. So it's really important, I think, to just be constantly thinking about what's the impact.
Yeah. And for you, have you seen an involvement in terms of the importance of things like even communication skills? And I'm thinking more around the technology-driven roles within businesses and the businesses you've been involved in. Have you seen an involvement of other skills other than the hardcore engineering side?
Yes. I temper that slightly though, in that I think kind of organisations are getting better at recognising like the neurodiversity of candidates. I've kind of had a bit of a bee in my bonnet for a while that a lot of sort of performance metrics or sort of recruitment selection kind of criteria, it's very much kind of based on, I guess, an extroverted sort of way of working and showing up. Now, I am a massive extrovert, and I've had to get comfortable with my inner introvert sort of during lockdown. But I really recognise that people show up in different ways, sort of whether it's as part of a performance conversation, development conversation, an interview, etc. So I think, I think, if you've got a broad range of skills, so you're not just, say, for example, gathering the data, but you can then sort of present back what's the insight, what is the story that you're telling, and also have that sort of right brain, left brain sort of way of thinking. So obviously left brain in terms of data, but then right brain in terms of telling the story. Obviously that is incredibly valuable. However, I think if somebody isn't a naturally gifted communicator, I don't think that's a challenge, because I think organisations are, or they should be, getting better at recognising there is diversity of thought and there's neurodiversity sort of amongst candidates. And ultimately, any candidate, graduate or not, you need to go to an organisation where you can be authentic and you can sort of be yourself, and you are valued for being who you are, not penalised because you're not a certain shouty jazz hands type of way like I am, for example. So yeah, so I'd say a sort of cautious yes to that question.
Yeah, and that's a great answer, I have to say, because you are right. The changing landscape of graduates, and not even just graduates, is it? It's across the board. And
100%.
I really hope, even now with remote working and how we've learned to be able to work from home, that actually will broaden the hiring capacity, because now people with disabilities are on an equal level playing field, essentially, if you can genuinely set them up in environments where they can be successful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think fintech really leans into that space as well, because I think if you were a fintech employer that was still doing a very traditional 2-day paper-based sort of assessment centre for graduates, now that does not scream digital fintech kind of by any sort of stretch of the imagination. And fintech really has got the opportunity to play around with new ways of recruitment. So I'm a massive fan of gamification in recruitment, for example. And that's certainly something that I want us to look at sort of further down the line, because I've seen that it can have massive benefits from a diversity point of view. So female candidates, for example, tend to do better in gamification methods, because female candidates, again, broad generalisation, but tend to self-select out more traditional numerical or verbal reasoning sort of tests. But then also for anybody who has sort of learning difficulties or is visually impaired, again, you can alter your sort of baseline in the gamification piece, to obviously take account of candidates who perhaps do have those difficulties at the very first sort of stage of the recruitment perspective. So I kind of think fintech's got every opportunity to try some stuff that's exciting, but also benefits, everybody regardless.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a great point, because it is around tailoring the recruitment model to get the right people rather than pigeonholing people into
exactly
archaic processes.
Exactly.
And so I suppose that leads us nicely onto the third question, which is more around the career advice. If there's a graduate who's knocking at your door saying, Charlotte, I'm about to enter the job market, what should I do to prepare myself? Is there any thoughts you've got? What would you give that person as a piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to kind of perhaps what I've already alluded to, I think it's about thinking kind of what is the impact of what you've been doing. So I think a lot of fintechs, because it's just such a fast-moving kind of market, they would want to see that you're comfortable with that level of pace, that you're comfortable with a level of ambiguity or complexity, because there won't always be a process or sort of something set up for a particular part of the organisation. So you've almost got to be comfortable with the fact, well, I might get the chance to build this, but I think that's a good thing. Personally, I really get energized by that. That's not for everybody. I absolutely kind of get that. So I think, if you can demonstrate that you're comfortable with that pace, comfortable with the level of ambiguity, kind of you can build something. I think back to my earlier piece, I think you've got to find somewhere that where you can be authentic and be yourself, and you're not being pigeonholed into something. So if it doesn't feel right, there's probably a reason sort of for that, and that's what I've always said whenever I've worked with graduates or in recruitment teams. This is much about the candidate testing us out, as much as we are sort of them as well. So it is a two-way conversation. I think also fintech, certainly the organisation that I work for and the space that we play in, because we are about supporting our customers' ambitions, wherever they are sort of in the world. So there's very much a customer focus, and so again, I think if somebody wasn't talking about the customer, wasn't talking about how they sort of improved it, so no matter how big or small, but they weren't talking about the improvement, they weren't talking about the impact that they delivered, I'd probably be slightly sort of worried. And I'm really proud to work for an organisation that is really mission driven. There's a real purpose that runs through our DNA. So I think kind of that's equally important, that a candidate is kind of aligned to the organisation's values as well. And ultimately, like I said, if you want to get stuck in, roll your sleeves up and potentially build something great for the future, fintech's probably a good place to be.
Yeah. And again, that's really good points. And I know obviously your CEO set up this business under a really good mission and wanting to help African nations and how that all works. So does that relate quite nicely then to CSR, and should graduates take an interest and challenge companies around their CSR policies or their values?
So I think that's probably happening naturally anyway. I think there was a McKinsey report last year which said that which said that 75% of candidates were 3 times more likely to work for an organisation if it had a clear mission or purpose. But only 13% of the organisations that they surveyed actually said that they did have one. So I think kind of the CSR, the diversity, inclusion and belonging agendas are becoming more increasingly important to people, and that is obviously a very good thing. So look, I think again it's that authenticity piece. If somebody is genuinely interested and wants to get involved in environmental causes, mentoring causes, and anything from that sort of social kind of giving back perspective, then absolutely do it, because it's a great thing to talk about. But if you haven't got that, again, I wouldn't necessarily worry or try to sort of shoehorn it in now. Just sort of think about actually where are those examples that you've demonstrated a real impact on people or on the customer.
Yeah, well, what great thoughts, and that just ties nicely, because it is, it's a changing landscape for graduates, even how they're studying right now. But
Yeah.
a lot of those things that we've discussed, the authenticity, the willing to roll your sleeves up, build something great, that's so transferable. Fintech especially, but actually any tech space where it's moving to. So thank you. That's been
My
really,
pleasure.
really good.
My
So,
pleasure.
everybody, that is another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. Thank you, Charlotte, for your thoughts. I appreciate how busy you are. So to be able to spare the time for the show has been fantastic.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Good. And to everyone listening, the podcast will be on our Spotify channel. It's going to be posted on the career pages of our partner universities and on LinkedIn. So till the next time, thank you.